what I learned from that is that there was a lot of hype around AI, and CEOs came to the team and said, you have to have an AI strategy. And the board would push on the CEOs to have an AI strategy. And that drove the wrong behavior. This is why when you're looking on the recent Gartner report, they're saying that most of the AI, one, they're still in experimentation. Second, most of them are failure. Because why? You need to have a strategy, but it's not purposeful. It's like it's a top-down mandate because we have the biggest force in the universe. It's the fear of missing out. If we don't do something with AI, we are doomed. The first thing that needs to go away when you're thinking about a transforming technology is like, this is the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask is what areas of the business today can operate more successfully given better tools.
Welcome to What If with Leslie Grandy. There's a version of leadership that gets taught. Frameworks, decision matrices, how to build a strategic plan, how to design an organization. And then there's the version that only comes from experience, from building something that gets canceled, from being wrong in front of people who were counting on you, from learning that the questions you ask matter more than the answers you already have. That version doesn't show up in a classic business school curriculum. It shows up in how a leader behaves when the ground shifts. It's about what it means to stay genuinely curious when you're the most senior person in the room. It's about building cultures where failure is a mechanism for learning and not a reason for blame. And it's about why the leaders who will matter most in an AI-accelerated world are the ones who never stop developing their own thinking, never outsource their judgment, and don't mistake speed for quality. My guest for this episode is Inbal Shani, Chief Product and Technology Officer at Twilio, where she leads product engineering and R&D. She was on the team that built the Amazon Fire Phone, and she has a lot to say about what that failure actually produced. Inbal thinks like a systems engineer, even when she's talking about people and culture, and she has strong, well-earned views on what AI can and cannot replace in the work that humans are doing. That's exactly what we get into. And I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to What If with Leslie Grandy. My guest today is Inbal Shani. Inbal is Chief Product Officer and Head of R&D at Twilio, where she leads product engineering and R&D operations. Inbal is an incredibly impressive leader who started as an applied scientist in the aerospace industry, earned a master's in mechanical engineering, and was applying AI to complex problems before most companies knew what to do with it. Her early work spanned genetic algorithms, self-driving cars, robotics, and navigation and control systems. Her career includes leadership roles at GitHub, Amazon AWS, and Microsoft. And in addition to her master's in mechanical engineering from Tel Aviv University, Inbal earned a Bachelor of Science degree in aerospace engineering, and she serves on the board of Checkmarks. Welcome to the podcast, Inbal. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Leslie, so much. I'm happy to be here.
This is great. Let's just jump right in because I'm so fascinated by your move from aerospace engineering to applied science to product leadership. And I've heard you talk about product leadership. So I feel like you're such an amazing role model for product leadership, but you came at it from a kind of a different journey. And I'm sure each transition required you to learn some new context. But I'm really curious, first, what kind of problems do you tend to gravitate towards? And what's the through line in that career?
Oh, well, I think that I enjoy solving very complex problems where you need to connect the dots between different components and you need to see kind of the bigger picture. You know, you mentioned I started my career in the aerospace engineering. I was an applied scientist and I progressed to become a system engineer. And when you're thinking in the world of aerospace engineering, what does system engineer means? It's the one that owns kind of the entire system. And if you think about an aerospace, if it's an airplane or a helicopter, it doesn't matter what vehicle, there's a lot of systems that needs to interact with each other. So a system engineer basically spends most of their time thinking about not just how each component is perfect by itself, but how you connect the dots between all these components and create that end-to-end product that is eventually achieving the goals that it has to achieve. And I think what it developed in me is kind of that broader thinking and the ability to analyze problems in the connected tissue between all these boxes, not just be an expert in one box or another, but being able to kind of comb through everything and figure out what are the things that needs to come together. And I think throughout the years, I kind of mastered that skill and brought it to all the roles that I've been playing, kind of the different parts of the stack.
That's really interesting. As I said, I'm sure each of those transitions gave you new context for that skill and new things that you had to learn in order to be able to effectively apply it. So I'm curious, what's your relationship as a leader with not knowing all the answers? And how do you sort of think about how that may have changed over time? When you were earlier in your career, did you kind of feel like you had to know them all? Or did you always assume that part of the journey, including learning the answers?
Yeah, I think I always assumed that part of the journey is learning all the answers. But when you're beginning your career, you're very insecure, right? Because you need to prove yourself. And if you have more questions than answers, then there is that fear. It's like, well, I don't know it all. Then why do they need me? If I ask a lot of questions, then maybe they will find someone who has more experience than me. But what I learned that this is not the case. Like the expectation is that you don't know it all, but the expectation is that you're always curious and you're always trying to learn and you're not afraid to experiment. You're not afraid to try it out. You cannot just stagnate and ask a bunch of questions and not move forward. So it's balancing the asking the right questions and then figuring out how to run an experimentation and like dive deep by yourself and figure out what are these gaps and then continue moving on and so on. And it's like, it's a flywheel that kind of builds itself. And you mentioned kind of my career and the different roles that I have been playing. And if you think about that, I've been all over the stack. I started in the aerospace industry and I did cloud, I did robotics, I went to developer tools, and now I'm in the communication world. So each role was in a very different technical space. It requires very different skill set. But what I brought into this role is my past experience, what I learned, what good looks like, but also the ability to come with an open mind, be very curious and being able to think through what are the problems I'm trying to solve for my customers and how should I solve that? And then connecting all of that together. And there's a lot of interesting learnings that are coming from that because you learn to fail, right? And failure is good. I know it's weird, especially for someone early in their career. It's like, you're asking me to fail here, but you learn from failure. You don't learn from successes. So as long as you learn how to fail forward, then you fail fast and you experiment and you move on and you learn and you continue to innovate and move forward. You're always going to climb up. You're never going to stay in place.
How do you build trust in your team that they can fail with intelligent risk taking and that in that sense it's okay, right? But that there may be failure that you're not as pleased with because it doesn't demonstrate some of the traits that you think should accompany that journey.
Yeah, I think that the key in creating kind of an experimentation is that you have to build honest and trust. So the expectation is that there's no one's going to be successful from the get-go, but you need to be able to have a clear communication with your teams and your teams to you. Here's where I am in the journey. Here's what's happening. Here's what I learned. Here's my risks. Here's how I'm managing my risks. So there's a lot about communication. So if you think about product leaders, you start your career, you don't know a lot, you're trying something. But if you're trying to hide the fact that you don't know, or you're trying to hide the fact that things are not moving forward, then your manager is not going to be happy with you because you're basically failing them by not giving them the information. So for me, the first thing that when I'm enabling my team to be able to fail forward is all about, but there is an expectation for clear communication. I need to know what is going on. I need to know what are the risks. I need to know what are the blockers. So I'm taking more calculated risk in terms of, for me and for the company, in terms of here's the things that you should be able to do, you should be able to meet. And here's the areas that if I see risks, they're too much in the critical path. So I cannot allow you to fail here. Here's the things that we're going to do together in order to solve it. But I think if there is not that kind of two-way communication, you cannot create an environment that people feel free to innovate. On the other hand, you don't want an environment that is too much scripted, so you don't allow these experimentations. So I think that's one. The second thing is all about prioritization. So think about in every product you build, in every project you run, there's prioritization that are areas that are very, very critical. Maybe it's a date that you need to hit. Maybe there's a conference you need to get ready for. Maybe there's a customer commitment. There's a lot of things that are happening. You need to be able to prioritize and saying, this is an area that I need to write a tight ship because I cannot fail on this one, or like the risk tolerance for this one is not high. And there are areas that are less complicated, they're less risky, they're not in the critical path, and I can enable experimentation. So it's all about open communication and then the manage of the prioritization in terms of where you have more ability to fail and less.
And so what I'm hearing from you is that you create conditions where failure done well, right? Failure where people are making evidence-based decisions but still get it wrong, or who are struggling in an area and not asking for help, right? Those two things look different to you in terms of failure. And so the conditions of failure are what you make clear to people.
Yes, that I think that, and also the two-way communication. Like, here's my expectation, and the communication back, and here's where we are. Here's what's happening. I'll give you an example. One of the things that we've incubated in Twilio is I have kind of a lab team. It's a small team, and they run experiments. They're running like Horizon 3 and, beyond, to the sky and beyond. And their failure is expected. If that team doesn't fail from the get-go, I know they're not stretching themselves kind of wide enough, large enough. They don't think big enough. So that team is expected to fail 99% of the things they do. And if they're successful in 1%, I'm very happy because, okay, I identified the next line of business that we're going to build for Twilio in the next generation or so. On the other hand, we have teams that are running the core business. There is less risk tolerance in that specific area because we have 400,000 customers and they depend on that and they run billions of messages and trillions of emails. So there is less risk tolerance. So it's all about also balancing these together with kind of what is the expectation and the communication.
I hear you talk about the flavors of risk and flavors of failure. There isn't one definition, and so much of it requires the context that you describe, it sounds like. So what is it that separates an R&D lab that actually influences markets from those that just do beautiful research that never ships? That, I've worked at companies where they've separated out these labs and they never sort of cross the chasm into commercial benefit. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, somebody who's spun them up and who's been an R&D leader, what is that magical difference between the ones that are able to do it and make it through and the ones that really stay stuck?
I think for me, it's the customer. Even if you're spinning off kind of an incubation team, there is always some sort of a customer problem that team is trying to solve. And it's grounded by the customer problem. Now, some of these customer problems are not something that your customers are coming to you and they're talking about it, but it's your anticipation of the customer problem. What is coming? We are seeing some trends in the market. What do we see the customers behave to? What do we anticipate these problems become and evolve in the fullness of time? And being able to anticipate that and give that to the incubation team so they're still working towards solving a customer problem versus working from I have a cool technical idea, let's go try it out and see a product market fit. So we're still trying to anticipate the product market fit even before you started the experimentation. It's just that a lot of these product market fit does not exist yet because you're basically inventing it.
That's such an interesting point. I just want to pause there for a moment because I think so much in your career, you've been involved in building things that you can't be sure are going to work.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so even with that customer insight, things might fail. So how do you process that, right? Like, we had the customer problem. We thought we had something that was emerging. And then it was impossible to know why it didn't work. But in retrospect, I'm a lot clearer about what I missed. What about, that situation helps you continue to double down on innovation? Because I think that not knowing part, right, if it's going to work,
yeah,
even if you have a customer problem that you're facing, can really demoralize an innovation team, right?
I think it starts with, let's say a product or a project has failed. What is the first thing that you're doing? Is that you're validating if the customer problem was the right one. That's the first question you ask yourself. I anticipated there is going to be a customer need. There's going to be a customer problem. I'm building a product towards that. So the first question is like, did we identify the right customer problem? Because we learned something from the failure. If we figure out that we did identify the right customer problem, then we're looking back into, so how did we solve it? What was the approach we took? What was the assumption we took? And what did we learn from that? So you kind of iterate and you refine your thinking process. And the third thing we always do is looking into the assets we build. Because even if we build a very simple POC or we wrote a PR FAQ or a document that describe our thinking, sometimes there are hidden gems there. And maybe these gems are not applicable for this customer problem, but if you think about them through a different lens, they're applicable to a different customer problem that you're working in. So kind of reusing and figuring out what are some of these assets that you have built are going to serve a different purpose, but not towards that product. Like what I loved, one of the biggest lessons learned from me when I joined Amazon. So I joined Amazon. My first role in Amazon was to be part of the team that was building the Fire Phone, which was supposed to be, the flagship product, Jeff Bezos' dream, all of that. And he spun off a huge team to do that, lots of components. I was focusing on kind of the location-based services because that was the background I came from with the navigation and control systems. And I joined Amazon, and I think it was 2 months or something like that after I joined, they canceled the project. And, as someone who came from the aerospace industry where you don't cancel projects and projects takes 5 to 7 years and like there is a waterfall kind of approach. Suddenly you're joining this giant company and they're canceling the project. And then you're looking around, you're asking yourself, okay, what am I going to do now? Like I'm that expert. That's what I do. That's what I've been doing. I'm now in a very different environment. I'm in a purely software company, and kind of the product that I was hired to build got canceled. So there are 2 lessons learned from me from that moment in time. The first one is that you get to reinvent yourself because you have skills that you have built throughout the years. You have a lot of lessons learned. You have a lot of experience. And if you think differently, you can still use these experiences towards building something else. So that's what I've done. I've pivoted to go work in a different team in Amazon and build something that is completely different. I built my first chatbot ever in my life for digital customer support in Amazon. I never built a chatbot. I didn't even know what I'm supposed to do with that. It was many, many months ago where it was very clunky. But it was, okay, I know how to solve big problems. I'm here to do that. I cannot solve these problems, so I get to do something else. And the second lesson learned that came from the Fire Phone is that there were lots of many assets that were built towards the Fire Phone. There were maps, there was routing, there was hardware components. And out of the Fire Phone, Alexa came because they had like all these hardware that was kind of in storage. There was nothing to do. So someone incubated Alexa. And then suddenly Alexa came, and no one thought that they need a speaking device. Yet look at us. All of us are with Alexas everywhere. And the second thing is like a lot of the mapping and the navigation went to feed kind of the Amazon last mile. So all the Amazon delivery and all these assets that they are using are built on the same maps. So if you think about that situation, it's like, first of all, it's a personal lesson for yourself. It's like, okay, I can't solve a problem. That problem does not exist. Can I do something else? And the answer was yes. The second thing is there were lots of assets that were built. Can the company deploy them to solve different problems? And the answer was yes. So I think that was a huge lesson learned for me pretty early on in my career, that you can do different things, even when you failed or even when you feel uncomfortable because suddenly someone pulled the rug from under your feet.
Yeah, no, I think that's also a great story of the fail forward comment you made earlier too, that what work came out of that could be applied to something that actually turned out to be scalable and durable is something maybe you wouldn't have seen at that moment. So I think that's the other way of thinking about fail forward. What we did could be applied in a different way, I think is a great lesson. So when you see, you've been in a number of different organizations and in a couple of different domains. And when you see organizations that talk about innovation and want to build a culture of innovation, but it doesn't actually take hold, what usually gets in the way? What do you see that tends to block the organization at large? Not necessarily the lab where maybe they say that's where our innovators go, but what does the organization tend to do that really prevents that disruptive innovation from taking hold?
Number one reason is fear. It most often, it's a kind of the innovator dilemma type of a situation. Many companies, especially when they get into a specific size. So they have a large set of customers, they have stable products, they have stable revenue. It's really hard to kind of unlock that flywheel of innovation because now you need to pivot resources. You need to pivot your thinking. You need to go and do something else that is not necessarily in kind of what you were used to do. So you're trying to branch out. Maybe you're trying to be multi-product. Maybe you're trying to go to a different segment of customers. Maybe you're trying to go to a different region. And the fear that stops you is, what if I fail? Like I spend so much time in kind of establishing myself in the current market with the current product. Now I need to take a new risks. What is my risk appetite? And the fear is always the things that slows companies and it slows people. Comes together kind of that fabric of a culture. So for leaders to build an environment that removes that fear is how you always create that bandwidth that you can always innovate. Like it's not a start and stop. It's not a switch. It's like today we're going to be innovative. It doesn't work like that. You have to kind of build innovation in your team organically all the time. There needs to be a flow of innovation happening from the team all the time. And I mentioned that we have kind of the lab team, our emerging technology team, but innovation is not just happening there. Innovation is happening all across the organization. That team specifically is tasked in terms of, think about the things that no one has time to think about. And it's like, it's many, many moons out here and you get to dream big and experiment. But on the day-to-day innovation, day-to-day experimentation, everyone is thinking about that.
You're listening to What If with Leslie Grandy. If you want to activate your imagination and build your creative muscles, I've put together some free resources, including webinars, downloadable content, bonus book content, and even a GPT to help you achieve your goals. Access these free tools to start asking what if today at lesliegrandy.com/resources. Yeah, it's interesting as I'm hearing you talk, a couple of my own experiences. One thing I think around fear is how big the disruption has to be in order for it to be valuable. And a lot of people want innovation to be less of a blast radius.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're starting to talk to people in different parts of the company about that innovation changing how work gets done, maybe it's the support organization or the sales organization or the finance organization, you move from a transaction to a subscription model. People put barriers in terms of that risk tolerance inside different kinds of teams, not just, right. So it's not just the product that can innovate, you have to maybe innovate the environment the product lives in.
Yes, you have to innovate the company. Twilio went through a giant transformation in the past 2.5 years. And it's not that Twilio was not innovative. We were not focused. We were kind of all over the place. We tried so many things. We didn't know to acknowledge failure when it was the time. I also think we were not financially responsible as a company. So we overspend on innovation versus the core product. And 2.5 years ago came a new CEO. He brought a new leadership team, including myself. And the goal was, what does it take to turn this ship around? And to turn this ship around was, okay, we need to be financially responsible in terms of how we're managing the company. But the second thing is like the company has to be innovative, but it has to be innovative with purpose. So what are the goals that we're trying to achieve? And that takes a lot of being intentional in terms of how you're addressing what you're trying to achieve. If it's a product, but for us, it was a full company transformation. It's not enough that, okay, R&D is now focusing on these bits and pieces and R&D is going to develop these things. Because if the rest of the company doesn't transform together with the R&D organization, you're not really transforming. You're not really building that innovation culture, because for R&D to innovate, you want the sales team to bring some insights from the customers that you don't get all the time. And you want to get the feedback coming from the support organization. And it requires the marketing team to think differently about the brand and about positioning. So becoming an innovation company, it's a full company goal. It's not R&D here, go take 5 people and go build something. It doesn't work like that.
I love the point you made about purpose. And I think purpose isn't always understood by all the teams that try things. And so when AI gets introduced in companies who are not primarily technology companies, they struggle with how to use it. What's the purpose of us using or integrating AI? Or what's the purpose for this transformation so we can use AI? How do you think companies should be thinking about bringing AI into their business transformation? And I'm talking about whether it's a technology company or a retailer or even, healthcare. When you think about that as a transformative technology and the innovations that it can fuel, what is it that you think those companies that typically don't accept that grand scale of innovation need to do to make that transformation purposeful, meaningful?
Yeah, I think I have a chance to talk to a lot of customers, and some of them are coming from tech companies and some of them are not from a tech company. And in my time at GitHub, I had a chance to launch Copilot. So the first coding assistant that emerged to the world of AI. And most of the companies, when we launched it, they didn't really know what to do with it, because it's like, well, we have developers, they write code. Why do we need these coding assistants? So, there was kind of a showstopper for them to even get started and figuring out. What I learned from that is that there was a lot of hype around AI. And CEOs came to the team and say, you have to have an AI strategy. And the board would push on the CEOs to have an AI strategy. And that drove the wrong behavior. This is why when you're looking on the recent Gartner report, they're saying that most of the AI, one, they're still in experimentation. Second, most of them are failure. Because why? You need to have a strategy, but it's not purposeful. It's like it's a top-down mandate because we have the biggest force in the universe. It's the fear of missing out. If we don't do something with AI, we are doomed. The first thing that needs to go away when you're thinking about a transforming technology is like, this is the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask is what areas of the business today can operate more successfully given better tools? For example, today, like marketing campaign is a good example. Every company that I know sends marketing campaign. Most of that is a bunch of emails. They land in your mailbox, especially in the world of retail. And these mailboxes get full. And like you never open the email that you got unless it's from a very specific brand that you like. And maybe there's a sale or a discount. So we all, we like ourselves. So we like the discount code that we get with that. So these are likely the emails that you open, but the rest of the emails are not. But for years, marketing was all about, let's bombard your mailbox. If we give you 57 emails that are saying the same things, maybe you'll open one of them. But what happens is it created the opposite because our mailboxes are so full. We don't read these emails. Sometimes we just send them with like our rules to kind of immediately to the trash. So companies are missing that mindshare. They cannot get to us. When you're thinking about AI can create a much more personalized engagement with you as a consumer because maybe that company has a lot of information on you. Most companies have, but they don't use it. So how you use these information in order to create that personalized engagement. So when you're thinking about how marketing is getting to transform in this new world, and again, it doesn't matter if it's a tech company or not, but the function that is doing marketing is going to be very different a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, because AI unlocks a potential that was never available for these marketers before, creating more personalized, maybe creating more rich content, maybe knowing exactly what is the things that you're looking for. So this is an example, but it's true across everything that is happening because AI has its usefulness. Two things you need to do. You need to adopt AI responsibly. Tokens are expensive. LLMs models are expensive. And companies that open the floodgate are now paying the price and now they're shutting down all the tools. So it's went from like, let's do everything AI to let's do nothing AI because it's too expensive. But if you're thinking, for example, marketing is a good example, I need to create pipeline. And in order to create like a proper pipeline, I need to be more purposeful towards getting engagement from customers. Can I apply AI to solve that? And what's the return on investment? If I do that for support, because I get more support calls than my support agents can answer. Can I automate some of these workflow? If it's a voice AI or a chat, can I solve more customer problem? Can I remove the friction? Can I improve the kind of the customer satisfaction out of that engagement? Again, you use AI for purposeful. As an R&D leader, I can tell you that coding assistant is a life-changing for my engineers. Not because I need less engineers, because my engineers are more productive and they get to write most of the time better code in a faster time. It's easier for them to find things that they're looking for. It's easier for them to build new products. And a lot of the time when you work in R&D, there is tech debt. What do we do with all these technical debt? And now with the coding assistant, it really helps us to think through tech debt differently because it used to be, we cannot re-architect, right? Because we'll break everything. But now you can potentially spin off even a new product in a shorter period of time. So it removes a lot of the friction. It goes back to what we started the conversation. It's all about being purposeful. What is the problem you're trying to solve for the company? Where you have opportunities to do better, to achieve your goal with better tools? And can AI help you accelerate that and how? And then you put the boundaries in terms of like the budget, the implementation and everything you're trying to achieve against that return on investment.
Yeah, you started that answer with companies asking, we need an AI strategy. What's our AI strategy? And I think clearly what I extracted from your answer is that's the second or third level question once you've identified the problem you're applying AI to. You can't ask the question of what's an AI strategy and have purpose. You have to figure out where to apply it purposefully what customer problem will benefit or what employee problem will benefit from it. And then that will define what your AI strategy is being deployed for based on both the economics that you're saying. Is that a problem that should be solved this expensively? And will I get it right? So evaluating your AI strategy after you have the problem you're throwing it against, and then making that decision based on whether or not you're bringing a sledgehammer to a thumbtack and you really shouldn't be using AI for that particular reason, right? So I really like that. I think that purposeful customer orientation doesn't go away with this need for AI integration, right? Or AI transformation. And I think that is a mistake we see a lot of companies making, because they start from my board or my shareholders want me to have an AI strategy.
Yeah.
And that's
AI
the wrong question.
Or adopt an AI tool so they can write it in the shareholder letter.
Yeah, exactly. You said there's a creative aspect to what people do that you don't see AI replacing. I'd love to know what you kind of see in that regard, and especially what that changes about what you interview for in people who you will bring onto a team that it's going to be heavily working with AI. So what are those specific human things that you feel will sustain, and how do you look for those in employees that you bring on board?
Yeah, when I think about history of humanity, and I love history, so I always reflect on the past when I'm looking into the future. Throughout the years, throughout our evolution, what made people very unique is our creative thinking. We have the ability to create something out of thin air that no one saw before, right? If you remember the statue of David, right? I've seen an angel in the stone and I let it loose, or I set it free. That is something that is so unique in the human brain that I don't think AI is not creative, but AI is creating creativity in a very different way than humanity. The advancements that we have done throughout our evolution is phenomenal. You have not seen any other being transform the way we did. And my biggest fear is that we are becoming some sort of lazy or less curious because we go immediately to the AI. We ask it question instead of trying to be more thoughtful, instead of asking the right questions. Like it's very concerning when I'm reading reports that saying that the current generation IQ is going down, which is, it's supposed to go up. It's not supposed to go down. So what is happening? And it just comes from the place that people are becoming less curious because we are a creature of habits and we like things to be comfortable. When we're comfortable, we're less innovative. Humanity has always made step changes when we were uncomfortable. And AI is making us very comfortable because you can go into and do everything you want in one place. Now, I think it's a magnificent tool, but I think that as humanity, if we delegate the thinking to AI, we're making a serious mistake. So when I'm working with my teams, even at home, when I'm talking to my college kids, it's, yes, you can use AI. It's a great tool, but the thinking needs to come from you. And your thinking needs to be clear, because if you ask AI an open-ended question, it's going to give you an answer, but it's going to give you its answer. It's going to give it that perspective. You want to give AI your perspective, and you want AI maybe to be a sounding board for you. You want AI to be able to help you get your thinking more crisp, but you don't want to delegate thinking to AI. So to be successful in the world of AI, you always have to continue being curious. Read a lot. Investigate yourself. Try things out. It's easier to try things out now than it was before. Think about building a POC. Used to take us weeks and weeks and sometimes months. Now you can do all of that with like a quick POC using some sort of vibe coding or a coding assistant. You get to try things out. You get to take a picture and edit your entire house design using AI, right? Instead of going through renovation and figure out this is not exactly what you wanted. But you have to have your own thoughts that you're driving towards and not letting that go. And that's my biggest fear, that we're moving away from that. So every time I talk to students or I talk to employees, it's always about like, what brought us here will not take us there, but it's our brain that will continue. And we cannot let it go. So we have to continue in that way.
So how has it changed how you interview for people, knowing this is a belief that you have that strengthens their capacity to contribute? How do you interview for it now? Or have you changed it?
I think we did change it. I know I changed it. We used to interview for experience. Now we're interviewing for creativity more. It used to be very critical that you knew, especially, I work in tech. So for me, it's like, okay, do you know how to write code? How do you write code? Do you know how to build technical product? How you come up with product specification? So the interview used to focus a lot on like, what is your experience? What do you know how to build? And can you apply it here? Now it's more focusing on curiosity and on creativity. How would you solve these problems? How did you solve these problems? I'm looking for a pattern of thinking versus a pattern of just doing. It used to be very focusing on doing. Now it's the doing and the thinking that you're looking for, because historically you used to assume that if you do the doing, you knew how to do the thinking. Today, it's not the case, right? You can do the doing without doing the thinking. I know it's weird, but when you think about it in AI, in the world of AI, you can do a lot of things without spending too much thinking about it. Historically, it was not the case. You could not build a product unless you spent a lot of time thinking about it. And then the execution was the part. Now it's finding a way to interview on thinking, which is new, I'm assuming, to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I would love to get your take on this thought. Our organizational structure of product design, engineering, program management, they believe is going to change. And because everybody can be a designer with AI, everyone can be a prototyper. And that teams will actually be just builders. And while they will sort of gravitate towards having similar capacity because AI enables all of those things, but they will still need to bring something unique that isn't necessarily, a design style or a PRD writing capability. So what do you think the teams of the future are going to look like if we fast forward 5 years and people are now so much more capable in their old role of doing other people's part of their role or some of that work before? What do you think is going to change with the team structure?
I think it's a huge debate, and I kind of fall into slightly different camp. There is the camp that says everyone is going to be builders, everyone is going to be generalists because the tools are going to be the subject matter expertise. I think the opposite will happen, and I might be wrong, but I'm thinking it's going to be a world of subject matter expertise because the tools are generalist. You can do anything you want with the tool, but the thinking requires experience thinking in a very specific way. Can everyone build an app? 100%. Yes. The tools are there. You can go build whatever app you want. Do you have the thinking process? What does that really mean to make something that is usable for all people? That is kind of thinking about the nuances and the things that people are truly using the tools to achieve. I don't think it's something that comes without an experience, without you building these tools for years or building your career to building these tools. You need to understand people interaction. You need to understand what is people expecting. Again, it's that thinking part. And the more you have experience in a specific domain area with the tools, you are now getting like a supercharged subject matter expertise versus the generalists that can do it all. I've been having a lot of conversation with my engineering team, other engineering teams, because there's always that, AI tools are going to replace engineers. We will not need engineers. By the way, we don't need any more systems because everyone can vibe code their way to whatever workflow. And, Twilio is an enterprise company. I have a system and an infrastructure that is, I call it the largest telco in the world, that sends billions of messages in a week, that sends trillions of emails in a week. And I'm thinking about, okay, if I'll let AI run the system and now there is an outage, do I trust AI to go figure it out for my customers? And what do I tell my customers? Like, I have no engineers anymore because I opt out to have an AI tool. So you wait until the AI will debug the systems. It requires humans to maintain large scale systems. There is something that exists in us that does not exist in AI, that you cannot delegate the entire work of a software engineer. And also, if you're just, everyone is like, builders can build whatever. SaaS is dead because builders are building tools. Okay, who gets to maintain all these tools? Is the builder that is not technical will know how to maintain these tools? So to summarize that, my perspective is that the subject matter expertise will exist. They will just be more powerful. They will be more innovative. They will be able to achieve so much more using the tools, and the tools will be the generalists because they will be able to connect the dots and do a lot of the things and kind of bridge the gaps between the different elements of building a solution, design, engineering, product, the tools will be able to be a better glue for all the three of them to work better together. But you still want that human experience that is kind of coming from the three angles of what it takes to build a product.
Getting deeper at AI and coming in with all of your proof points to an interview that you've done all this with AI without lived experience, without those failure moments that you learn from and can talk about, right? That you can actually point to without context for how we know that was good or could have been great, right? I think that's a really important element to this. And I was intrigued by this notion of everybody's a builder, but I really appreciate the idea that AI needs to be the generalist, and that in that human interaction, human values, human experience side of things, we have to have a point of view of what good or great looks like. This is adequate, but what it needs to be great is this, right? And I feel like I get a lot of adequate answers from AI, but not necessarily the great ones.
Right. You're not going to go to an AI tool and say, come up with my company's next strategy.
The moment that people who are moving into AI realize that it's their responsibility, that agency over the outcome, I think they'll be less threatened about being replaced by it because they'll have a purpose, right? Getting back to that word, they'll have a purpose in the equation.
If we don't have a purpose, then who we are as humans.
I love that.
For us as humanity is like, what are the choices we're making right now? Because the choices we're making is going to impact the future that we're building for ourselves, for our kids, for our grandkids, and so on. And the purposeful, the judgment, the creativity, these are human capabilities. Doesn't mean, I've read somewhere that someone said, only 5% in the next few years, only 5% of the code is going to be written by human. And everyone's thinking, 95% is going to be written by AI. This means we need less people to write code. No. It means that we'll still write the same amount of code by human. It just means that we're going to be able to write 100% more code than what we're writing right now, because we now have the tools to be more productive, to produce products faster, so we can innovate faster because of the tools. It doesn't mean that what the human produces is going down. It just means that we will be able to generate so much more than it's even harder for us to imagine.
And that creates all sorts of human responsibility around what that output actually is. Is it useful? Is it quality? Right? Is it actually sustainable? Right? It may work. And I think that's the other part where I think there's a little too much infallibility ascribed to AI output. And I don't just mean hallucinations, I mean quality, value. I can get an answer and it's not wrong. It may not be the best.
Right. And unless you have the curiosity, unless you have the judgment, unless you have the creativity to poke into that, you'll take good as good enough, right? And then we're strive for mediocrity versus greatness, what we always strive as humanity. It's like, we want to be great. We want to kind of continue developing more. We want to continue expand. We want to continue being more creative. If you start compromising on that, then we're lowering the bar. There's a lot of content being created by AI, right? Books are created by AI. Podcasts are created by AI. YouTube are being created. A lot of content is being created by AI. It starts clouding our judgment between what is real and what is not. Also, that content is not great, right? It's okay at best. But it's not something that is transformative. It's not something that you're looking to that. It's like, I've never thought about it before. So it takes us back versus move us forward. And we have to, and again, I think AI is an amazing advancement. It's a great tool, but as humanity, we have to know how to use it. So we will continue to advance versus going backwards.
This has been such a wonderful conversation, Inbal. I'm so grateful for the time that you allocated for it. And I love the ground that we covered. And I knew the first time I met you that we would hit some of the high points I really was hoping for. And your experience really just gives us a new perspective on them. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It was so much fun.
You've been listening to What If with Leslie Grandy. If you want to learn more about creative leadership in the age of generative AI, subscribe to my Substack at lesliegrandy.substack.com.